So welcome. We will kick off the webinar now. So thank you everyone for joining us. This is Hostaway's annual predictions webinar. We always have a lot of fun on this and we've got some great guests. Now, if we think about last year or this year still, I'm already in 2025. If we think about 2024, it's been a year that I think probably quite a few people might want to shut the door on the year. It's been a sort of a mixed up and down year. But if I think about bigger picture themes of the year, it's one of them has been regulations. You know, regulations for the vacation rental industry has been a much bigger story this year, with regulations and legislation being put in place or being talked about being put in place. This time last year, I think there were probably quite a few people still in denial about AI, thinking that it was just for other people or robots. Now everyone and their granny is using AI, and AI is part of our lexicon and the norms. So we've got that. And then also in 2024, we had the big phenomenon of the Swifties and live events and Taylor Swift coming and changing everything and making lots of people lots of money through that. But then also we had the Paris Olympics, which was a sort of an opposite of that. So there's been lots of things in the industry that have kind of shaped 2024, apart from, of course, the macro trends and the fact that half the world has been voting this year and changing elections. So we've got lots of things to talk about. And Simon, I know that you looked at your predictions from last year for this year, and I think you were kind of spot on. So do you want to kick us off by talking about what you predicted and then leading us on to bigger picture of what you see 2025 for the vacation rental industry?
Thank you, Jessica. I'm glad to be here tonight. Couldn't have made a better summary, but as you alluded to, quickly checked on my predictions on the last year's webinar at the same time. I think we're pretty spot on a high level: increased regulation, AI, automation, integration, industry consolidation, guest expectation and professionalization, diversified business model is an interesting one, and potential technology partnerships. Always trying to be as self-critical as we can. What did we miss? A couple of things I would like to mention. Number one, the market has softened more than what we anticipated in certain geographies. It's always hard to generalize STR, right, when it comes to market development. And Richie is nodding because he obviously looks at data all day long. But if we look at it from a higher altitude, it's always hard to say, you know, this market has gone well and this one has gone less. I think overall we can say the market has softened in terms of ADRs, occupancies, and demand. Supply has outpaced the demand, so that has a direct impact on the unit economics and metrics. So that's something probably we have missed in our predictions for 24, that the market we would have anticipated to hold up stronger. And, you know, being at last year's DARM conference, we saw some data leading into 24. So we were more convinced that despite the election year, et cetera, it was holding up, and it was less, which was triggered by many different events that you have already alluded to, Jessica. The second point, more on a more constructive note, is I'm leaving the year of 2024, the short-term rental industry, as we're in the hospitality industry. I think for me, having attended, you know, probably 24 of conferences this year across the world, we finally come to the conclusion, well, we've always tried to find, you know, what is this industry all about? Short-term rental, vacation rental. You know, we had some like alternative accommodation and some other strange things that came up, gave us a title. I think we are and we will be part of the hospitality. We're 14% of total hospitality as an STR vacation rental industry, and we need to arrive at the hospitality because it implies by the expectation that our guests have in terms of what we deliver as a product at the end of the day. So a big takeaway for me is we have arrived in the hospitality industry, and just having attended recently the DARM conference in Florida again last week, it became everybody's conclusion that we are in the hospitality industry. So that's the two things I probably missed in terms of predictions. On the outlook for 2025, on a high note, I think we are seeing very, very, very similar predictions that we have already talked about. I mean, how long can we take? When can we manage on this panel not to talk about AI? We can't. So that adoption is going through the roof. It's the talk of town, next to regulations, which will continue be with us as an industry overall. Market consolidation and technology will continue to accelerate without a doubt. But we also need to mention sustainability and ESG focused. We need to further embrace sustainability as climate change, and we're definitely going to talk about it in this panel as well, will have a further impact on our industry, which we need to adapt to as well. And then I guess last but not least, I want to talk about diversified revenue streams, which is something we need to continuously pick up while we're facing more and more margin compression in terms of higher operating costs, higher distribution costs. We need to better understand in how we can monetize our guest while he's staying with us. And this is not monetization of the homeowner who already feels that he's paying too much anyway. So there's definitely a competition happening out there, and homeowners are very nervous. So we'll see increase of churn in 2025 while homeowners try other property managers at a lower margin. And therefore, we need to be able to create more stickiness in terms of our value proposition as property managers towards our guests, and potentially increase the shopping basket with upselling opportunities and added services to these guests.
That's brilliant, Simon. You've given a lot of food for thought there, and we will come back on all those themes. I think the bit that is really, the fact that short-term rentals, vacation rentals are part of hospitality and are growing against hotel market share is significant and feeds into the professionalization that I know we're going to talk about on this panel. But first up, one of the things that I'd love to speak to you about and is around the changing customer behaviors, so the booking trends that you guys are seeing for next year. And Marcus, do you want to kick us off with that? So what are you seeing from Hostaway's perspective, or what do you predict for next year?
Sure, absolutely, and I'd love to hear also Rich's point of view on the softening ADRs, and yeah. You're into the data after all, but here's what we're seeing is that the travel behavior has gone pretty much like our economy. It's split, where on one hand, things are better than ever, but on the other hand, there's areas of weakness, and those two things can coexist. So what I'm talking about is how over the last 4 years, travel behavior in 2020, it went quite extreme. Some people used to travel and then they stopped, or the other way. They used to never travel and suddenly they started exploring the world of vacation rentals. Whereas now some have gone back to normals, but others haven't. There's a lot of digital nomads. We see the seasons are getting longer. So areas that used to be booked in summer, they're now fully booked for spring and fall as well. And there's a lot more also convergence on the long term and the midterm rentals. So a lot of people who used to travel 1 week here, 1 week there, now they go and book 1, 2, or 3 months somewhere. At the same time, another trend that we're seeing and that will continue in 2025, especially as we got this economic split where some markets are doing well and others are not. To give an example, US has record low unemployment right now. Canada has record high unemployment right now. And typically those two economies, they're fairly big, but they go hand in hand because they're right next to each other. But that's not what we're seeing right now. And what this means for an individual property manager is that your type of properties or your location might be in a slump. And it could be that you're even in a slump in an area where everything is booming, which can feel a bit bad, but that's just reality of what it's like. But consumers are feeling the same thing. They have stress. I just saw a really sad LinkedIn post about a company that surveyed its employees for stress levels, and then those who had too high stress level, they laid them off. We shouldn't be laughing about that, but I thought it was somehow funny. But that's pretty much what consumer sentiment is like right now. People want to buy stuff, and to some extent they have the money, but it's still they're uncertain about it. So what they're doing is they're postponing the decisions, but they're eventually making them because, if nobody travels, we're not going to sit here and talk about ADR softening. We're gonna sit and talk about the collapse of the entire travel segment because travel is a luxury. Nobody needs it like you need food or water, shelter. Travel is a luxury, but what I'm getting to is last minute bookings are on the rise, and especially people want to book to have the certainty to be able to cancel or change their plans. Not even cancel, but maybe stay shorter or stay longer. And one very interesting trend that I've seen is that airlines now, the cost difference between flexible tickets and non-flexible is a lot lower than it used to be. So let's say previously you could buy a flexible ticket at 50% higher price. Now the price is only 20% higher because the consumer demand is so much more that they can make a lot more money by selling those flexible tickets. So people are really taking advantage of that. And that's what we need to adopt to as an industry as well to make sure that we can accommodate that flexibility. So those are the two big trends that we're seeing right now.
So that's kind of huge stuff, Marcus, and that changing consumer expectations as well that we're sort of seeing across every industry, really, where consumers have got purchasing power is really interesting. I just want to ask you a little bit more detail about why we're seeing some markets doing well, but then the neighbor not doing well, like you just said. Can you just explain that? And then Richie, I'm going to come to you to talk a bit more about the softening ADRs and what you're seeing there.
Yeah, it's really a large mix of factors, and I don't think there's any single driver. But what I always think about is how I'm sure we all have read some comments or have some opinions about McDonald's. It's a company that has been heavily criticized this year and the last year and the last couple of years for having unhealthy food at ridiculously high prices. Yet somehow people end up going there anyway. And my point with that is that people may have opinions, but they don't vote with their opinions. They vote with their dollars. And if media can write all they want about how McDonald's is expensive and bad for you, but if people are actively going to go there, then that's what they do. And it's the exact same thing in vacation rental markets. People can say my dream vacation looks like this, but that doesn't mean that's where they're actually going to put their money. Where they're putting their money is exactly where it happens to be. And it's just like the solar eclipse we had this year and the Swift concerts and the Paris Olympics is a proof of that you really don't know. It's getting much harder to tell because the booking window is shorter. It's getting much harder to tell what's going to be successful and what's not. And that's why dynamic pricing is incredibly important at this point, as I'm sure Richie agrees to as well.
Absolutely, Marcus. And it does make a predictions webinar quite difficult to do, doesn't it? But Richie, you're from PriceLabs. You're all about the money and pricing. Can you come in and give us some of your thoughts on this?
For sure. First thing that I want to say is I've realized I can't be a good poker player, as Simon pointed out earlier in the chat. The reason why I was hesitating when Simon said ADRs have been lower is, which Simon addressed a little bit later, is there is so many different geographies and so many different types of markets, even within a geography, to blanket say ADRs have softened or etc. Right? It's a little bit of a harder statement. But one thing that is definitely very evident is that supply growth across most major developed markets has generally slowed down, right? For example, right as we're coming out of COVID, the 21, 22, 23 slightly lesser so, but 21 and 22, we saw this crazy increase in supply. we've not seen a decrease in supply yet in most markets, but we have seen a slowdown in supply. Now that's different from if I'm talking about certain markets in APAC, in LATAM, they're still seeing good supply growths, right? But major markets have seen a slowdown in supply growth, which has towards the second half of this year, right? Very little, but has led to a slight occupancy increase. And for first time in many months, we're seeing demand slightly higher than the supply. That does not mean everyone's 100% occupied. What I mean is your supply growth has slowed down, but your demand has not slowed down as much. Demand has shifted, like Marcus was saying. It's coming more last minute in a lot of places, right? But we're seeing that. So towards the second half of the year, we saw occupancies being higher than what they were in 2023. Now you can't compare them to 2019 yet. We're still lower than that. You can't compare it to 2022. I don't know if we'd ever have the years like 2022 again, right? Unless something dramatically happens and people are not able to travel for several years, or our supply becomes really flat and demand then continues to grow up, right? But relative to 23, we definitely had second half of the year looking better, right? Then the next way you think about it is also we think of urban segments, right? And urban segments didn't do as well as they had done in prior years, right? Partly maybe people are traveled out. They've done a lot of those travels in 21, 22, 23 once COVID opened. Maybe they traveled out, not sure why, right? We've seen a lot more vacation destination travels, right? We've also seen more supply on vacation, like lesser of a slowdown in the supply of homes in vacation markets, right? So say if they were growing at 20% year on year in 22, this year they're growing at 10% year on year, but it's not zero, right? Versus in urban markets, we've seen some slowdown. Partly also we touched on regulation, but partly controlled by regulation as well, where it's resulting in overall slowdown of those regions, right? Anyways, coming back, I think the supply is slowing down, especially in developed markets, and that's resulted for some increase towards the second half of this year. I think for a lot of the markets, economy is starting to look a little bit more better in 2025, or at least that's the market hope for 2025, which should yield hopefully good travel outcomes for a lot of property managers and every player involved in this industry, right? I think little less uncertainty that's come about with elections, right? More economic certainty that has happened in markets.
Thank you, Richie. And it's really interesting about travel, because travel is seen, I know it is a luxury as well, but it's often seen as quite not going with the economic winds. People still travel. Maybe they travel less, maybe they travel to slightly cheaper, closer places, but it's still very much. So I think the industry is always on an upward trajectory. It's just at what scale that is, or how sharp the trajectory is. But what I'd love to talk about now, and Annie, I'd love to bring you in here, is tying this into that change in consumer expectations and what they're looking for, and the reasons for travel, and the kind of the fact that it is, someone talked the other day about set jetting and Instagram travel, and just the way that decisions are made as well. And then from that we can move into some direct booking conversations as well. But Annie, would you like to talk about what you predict for the changes with consumer expectations for next year and how that will impact the industry? You're on mute.
There we go. Consumer behavior has changed pretty dramatically in the last couple of years, and that's for a number of reasons. That is younger people, Millennials and Gen Z. 77% say the number one reason they travel is traveling on their passion points rather than traveling on their destination. And those passion points are everything from a Taylor Swift concert, a sporting event, because they're really into knitting. That is honestly something I have heard from someone in the past, from a user in the past. to something that they want to take a video of. So that consumer behavior is changing to, yes, more last minute bookings and more really instigated by something at the destination that is not the rental. Obviously, the hospitality, the professionalism is still very important, but what you're doing there is more important sometimes. And the reason for that isn't just that they're younger, it's because we have changed from still, it used to be the Instagram wall, right? So it used to be everyone wants the thing with the butterfly wings or whatever it is. And we have pivoted all of our socials primarily to video. So it isn't just the passion points, is that people are going there to video something. And that's just making a really big difference. Generally, that's not just the house they're at. It might be now because that house has a lazy river at it, right? It might be something there, but it's generally coupled with something at that destination. And something that is also changing is we are seeing that in the way people are marketing their rentals. So your rental can be in an incredible destination, but you're going to have photos not just of the interior of the property, something there, or you're going to say, hey, we have on demand. We had someone who said we have on demand mobile tattoo artist for the week of Coachella. I mean, what an incredible marketing opportunity, right? Because that's the thing that's going to get you excited rather than I've gone to Coachella for the last 9 years. And that is having across from the moment you book all the way through even rebooking, that passion point is a really big part of that.
I got slightly distracted because there was a balloon in Marcus's background. I suspect there's a daughter flying around that room there somewhere, but
It's possible.
it's possible. It's possible. So Annie, it's really interesting, all of this and the change in kind of the consumer, just like the expectations, it's no longer, I'm just going to go into a home and make sure it has X, Y, Z. It's, I really want that experience of the things that are within that area of the home. And I think we see it in lots of ways. But one thing I do want to say is that I know we had so much publicity about Swiftonomics and Taylor Swift and the impact that had on travel and lodging, not just short-term rentals, but everything actually, restaurants, retail. Was that a one-off? Or do you think that really that these kind of events do have the impact that the press and all of us have kind of talked about a little bit? Or was it really just kind of a one-off?
I don't think it's a one-off, and I think that is a combination of the way people are curating where they want to go. It is here to stay. And also, as Simon said, if you see softening ADR, you see property managers who are more open to non-rental revenue. So, I mean, we've seen that evidenced across the board is property managers saying, oh, we're seeing people traveling for these reasons, and we are finally opening up to non-rental revenue. And as Simon also said, becoming more open to, we are just hospitality and we are not that different from a hotel, where it used to be we're property managers, people just come for the villa, they would never go to the hotel. You see a lot more openness to daytime rental as opposed to even a night rentals, to adding ancillary services like spa and chef on site, and adding those specific passion points. So I think because of that, and also property managers, once they do that, they start to see the revenue that they're getting from that, and they start marketing that and marrying those two together.
Excellent, Annie. And more on that kind of consumer stuff. Jeremy, I'm going to bring you in from here because you've got many, many years of experience in vacation rentals, lots and lots of years. And how are you seeing from the guest perspective, the demand, and maybe we can tie this into the professionalism and how it's maturing. We're maturing into that hospitality market more. And what are you sort of seeing, and what do you predict from next year from a guest demand perspective, and then managers needing to step up to that?
Yeah, thanks. I think I took a look back at some of our predictions for 2024, and I think maybe we got some right and some wrong as well. And I think one that might be a little delayed, so I guess we'll say we got it wrong, was a lot more guest personalization into the experience. And I thought that would have accelerated a little faster in 2024. I think it has accelerated, and I think it's a growing trend. personalizing to the guest, personalizing your operation to that, the experiences around that. But I don't think it totally developed at the pace that we would have thought in 2024. So I think that's still coming in 2025. And I think this is just we've been on this gradual increase of professionalism and quality in this market for quite some time. And I think I totally agree about like being a hospitality provider. I think this was happening pre-COVID. The trends were already in place. Convergence between hotels and vacation rentals, cross-shopped on Expedia and OTAs and booking sites. COVID kind of threw that for a loop a little bit, and I think had some delayed effects. Now that we're past that, I think we're starting to see that pick up again, and that's really going to be the thread that I think picks up the most in 2025, which is there's just going to be a very strong, there already is, like guests are demanding quality properties, quality experiences, quality service while they're at the property, before and after the booking. And I think in 2025, that's just going to pick up even more. I think travel is a luxury. Aren't we all fortunate to be able to go on trips and even to see each other at conferences or see our peers when we go to these conferences? But it's also something that people hold really dear, right? Even if you are facing some tough economic times or there's some economic headwinds, people figure out how to save their vacation, even if they downsize and they just go local and they stay somewhere a lot closer to home. People do figure out how to travel. And I think in 2025, now we've already seen like revenge travel. That was a thing, right? I don't know what we were revenging, but something. That doesn't we're kind of,
We were
I guess, yeah, revenging being stuck at home, I guess, taking revenge on ourselves. I don't know. But now people are over that. I think they're looking at where they want to go, what the experience is going to be, really looking for a quality trip. And I would just add, we talked a lot earlier in this call around less supply growth, a little bit of back and forth on softer ADR, right? But less supply growth. And I think in owner retention, which Simon was talking about, I think in 2025, that's really going to come home to roost, right? Lots of operators were accustomed to this organic unit growth and supply growth. And as that sort of slowed down a little bit, I think everybody leaned hard into, well, I'm going to figure out how to do more owner acquisition. How am I going to acquire more owners? And a lot of property managers ended up starting horse trading owners between themselves and just sort of like shifting these owners back and forth between managers in the market, making it really easy for supply to shift hands. I think now in 2025, we're going to have to pay the price for that, which is a lot more emphasis on owner management, a lot more emphasis on owner retention, and helping owners transparently understand if we are really leaning into quality service, like what are we doing? What are we doing for them from a revenue standpoint and from an operational standpoint to take care of their asset? And so I think that's going to be a big deal in 2025.
Yeah, it's such a big, important topic. And when I've been to conferences this year and I talk to property managers, it is the number one. It's like, how can I grow inventory and how do I make sure my competitors aren't taking, my owners from me? And it sort of really ties in with quite a few things that you've said, Jeremy, and also that I know that we'd like to talk about, which is, in the COVID years, we had a lot of operators come into the market. Everyone wanted to stay in a short-term rental. It was the opportunity to come in and be a manager or be an Airbnb host. And with the regulations coming in and being kind of like, hang on a minute, we've got to make sure that there is some sort of professionalism happening here, or making sure that it's an opportunity basically for managers that are really being professional and doing things the right way, following compliance, making sure that they're doing things that in a good professional way, means that potentially it eases out the ones that just came in 2022 to make a fast buck, to be kind of, part of this industry. And Simon, I'm going to kind of come to you on this. What are your thoughts on that? The fact that we had a lot of operators sort of come in and now, it's hard. We always say property management is hard. It's sort of getting harder, isn't it? So what do you think next year?
It's getting a lot harder, Jessica, and thank you for the segue, Jeremy. We could speak for hours on that. I want to keep it as short as I can, also for the rest of the panelists. I think if you look at the triangle of stakeholders in the property management industry, it's owners, guests, and our own staff, and our own business, our human capital that serves that business. I think the homeowner over time has been underserved in a great shape or form, to Jeremy's point, and I could not agree more. And we've heard Jason Sprinkle a couple of years ago at VRM Executive saying, if you don't have a relationship with your homeowner now, you better get onto it, otherwise you're dead in 2 years. And it resonates to me every day when I'm thinking about it. And as I alluded to at the trends at the beginning of this webinar, is that this is all about, we're in the relationship business, end of story. That's the only asset this industry has, and we need to accept that. And homeowners always feel betrayed, so we need to fix that. And when you look at the technology landscape, overall, the homeowner in terms of technology is totally underserved because he always feels betrayed. So we need to rebuild that trust to make sure we are as transparent as we can in terms of owner invoices, owner statements, with the fees that are getting charged, and they also potentially can participate. Owners are going to be our most important asset going forward in 2025, without a doubt. And we need them because churn is going to go through the roof, because homeowners, as I alluded to already earlier, will try out other opportunities that some property manager has less commission and predicts higher occupancy. Well, good luck, okay? So we need to be totally transparent and honest to our homeowners, be as credible as we can in terms of our data and information to have homeowners re-engaging with us going forward. So that's one thing that is going to be absolutely key for 2025 to continue, not even to grow, to maintain your business, and then potentially use homeowners to create additional leads. Homeowners have not been really included into lead gen and upselling opportunities to bring more units into the business, like referral agreements and whatever. Not homeowners just being there. They've been happy the last 3 years. They're not going to be happy going forward, and they want to change. So I think that's where we need to put our focus on one side, and then the rest is obviously navigating efficiencies that are coming from all over the place that we need to maneuver to reduce OpEx, use AI, make a full cost calculation of how we can save money in terms of our efficiencies, is technology bringing to us the results that we require to run our operation efficiently while we communicate transparently to homeowners. So I think these are the two absolute keys here. And I'm glad we talk about that, because at the end of the day, once again, we're in the relationship business, the only asset we have.
Thank you, Simon. Marcus, I'd like you to jump in here.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, because there's quite a few discussions here on the ADRs and the homeowners, and I think there's a few factors that haven't been mentioned here. It's not only the other property managers. There's a lot of things have been happening in the last 2 years. So one example that Richie mentioned, that ADRs have been, supply growth hasn't been that strong in cities. Well, that's because you're competing with long-term rents, and those have been going up like crazy, especially after the interest rates started going up around 2 years ago. And this is something to keep in mind, that no matter how good a relationship you have with your homeowner, if they can't afford to keep it as a short-term rental, then they're going to have to rent it long-term if it makes more money. And it's great having a relationship, but you should also look at those metrics, see what the rents are, and see, are you really bringing that value? The nice upside there is that this is a self-regulating, very dynamic market. Okay, it's not as dynamic as the stock market, where you can say something and then the same second the price changes. But it will take 6 to 12 months. But if there's too many short-term rentals in an area and too little supply, it will self-adjust itself. Those houses are not going to disappear unless they're out in a place where absolutely nobody wants to live. But then again, why would you want to go there? Another thing, another reason for that I think people should be, at least property managers should stay focused on, is what are the owners going through? For example, due to the changes in weather patterns or whatever you want to call it, I don't know, are we allowed to say climate change? Insurance rates have skyrocketed. And as a result of that, a homeowner may want to have a vacation rental, but they simply can't afford it. If your insurance rates go from 2,000 a year to 15,000, which is not an unheard of story, suddenly the amount of money you make after property taxes and all the other maintenance fees for a house can be quite dramatic. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight that it's not only a dynamic market that we are living in, it's very much impacted by the outside world and real economic factors.
Thank you, Marcus. And there's 2 points. I want to talk more about potential regulations and the impact, but can we talk about climate? We will call it climate change, because I know that you guys at Hostaway is releasing a report this week. And one of the points in the report is that the property managers are increasingly concerned about climate issues as being something that they worry about. You know, there's been quite a jump in that. And I know that we have it from different angles. You're talking about insurance, you know, costs going up because of that there, but also in certain kind of parts of the world, you go there and the weather is unlivable, or you know, it's not really the kind of weather you might want for a vacation, and that impacts, you know, is impacting quite greatly, really. And I just wonder your thoughts on that, on how you predict sort of the climate change, climate crisis concerns of next year from those different perspectives, from sort of, you know, guests and where they're traveling to, but also for property management and costs and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think property managers really need to be aware of the risks they have in their business. And if a place like Asheville, North Carolina can get completely destroyed by a hurricane, and for those who don't know, North Carolina is not supposed to have any hurricanes, but it was massive rains from a hurricane that just completely destroyed every single road out of the city. And probably a lot of houses got washed away too. If you're a property manager in an area that has never had any problems with weather before, you may wanna consider your risks. And yeah, it's not only in the East Coast. I mean, Seville in Spain was heavily flooded. There's wildfires, and there's, yeah, of course, big storms. Those are one-off events. But what every property manager should do is, at a bare minimum, if there is some notice, with flash flooding, there may not be a notice, but with big storms there are, and with forest fires there are, you need a plan in place. You need to know what to communicate to the homeowners, because this is, speaking of building relationships, the days or the hours before the storm hits, that's when you have the best time to establish that trust with the homeowner. And if things go downhill, then, well, ideal before it goes downhill, make sure you have diversified the property portfolio. Because if we see mass destruction in an area, what often happens is that the rental rates will skyrocket through the roof for the properties that are available. And the reason is very simple. You need people who come in and rebuild, and those people need to stay somewhere. But they're not paying themselves. It's the insurance companies paying. And those pockets are pretty deep because there's no other choice. You have to fix it right away, or else it will be more expensive later. So, for example, if you're managing 100 beach homes, that's great, but maybe you should add to the portfolio a couple of condos that are a bit further away from the beach. And yeah, if you're in a mountain town, maybe make sure that a few of those houses are actually up there and not at the bottom where all the water gathers. So those are a few implications I think that all property managers should learn from.
Thank you, Marcus. Jeremy, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think a couple of things on environmental impact. Like one, these events are becoming more frequent. It's definitely putting pressure on folks' operations, causing them to be much more diligent about their emergency preparation plans. Not only how they execute that, but how they also communicate to the guest about those plans. So helping the guest understand if you have guests in property while one of those things is happening, like what's going to happen next and how they can actually salvage part of their experience, right? It's not just, and then it's the guests who are coming, who are about to come, right? And so there's a massive communication problem that you pick up that's tied to the operations around this event. So I think that's one thing around like climate events. I think the other thing, environmental impact, I expect we'll start to see, right? Like this is a competitive advantage that hotels will probably try to lean into a little bit about like, they're just on top of it, right? Like devices are integrated across the hotel. They can do a better job on environmental impact reporting, from linens, energy consumption, et cetera. I don't think we're going to really feel this in 2025, but it's definitely coming. And I think it's something the industry needs to prepare for and start to think about like, what's the environmental impact from your business, having a much tighter view on operational expenses, energy expenses, helping your owners understand that as well. Like this is going to be a big, like managers who are forward thinking, if they get ahead of this in 2025, they'll be in a really good spot like 26 and 27.
Yeah, it's interesting because a year ago, 2 years ago, this would not really have been a conversation. Now, I know Simon's talked about it for a long time, but you all have your hands up wanting to put, input into this. And this is definitely new. Richie, do you want to go ahead and give us your thoughts here?
Sure. I think Jeremy beat me to it, but I really wanted to say like there are vulnerable, like each destination, particularly if you're a beach destination, you're vulnerable, right? And if you're a snow destination, there's going to be some shifts and patterns, right? But there's also an opportunity that I think property managers should really think about and take advantage of, like Jeremy was saying, which is many of us are now conscious travelers, or whether really or we want to portray, right? And so we are looking for certain terms like we are looking for, oh, this property has solar panels or has water saving things that are happening, or is close to a public transport, or is close to public charging, EV charging station, or things like that, right? And so which is sometimes could be very minor, but is a quick fix if you have properties that are in that sustainable realm somehow, right? How can you just put that out very like particularly on your listing descriptions, etc., right? And then if you think about your property portfolio improvements from your homeowners as you're talking to them about it, also something to consider. And like you said, maybe not in 2025 immediately, maybe it's 2026, but we know it's coming, and a lot more of us are looking for that feel-good factor, which can have an impact on bookings.
Yeah, thank you, Richie. Before I come to you, Annie, I'm just going to say that Helen from Scotland said they've seen a big increase in visitors going to Scotland who want to escape the heat, particularly, the heat of Southern Europe. We can have well, I would say the rain of Scotland, but I think that's probably not fair to say that it's got beautiful weather in Scotland. But Annie, for you, please.
Yeah, I think that the climate change, it is, as Richie said, it is very much also in the consumer behavior and consumer desires lane. So we have had, and this has surprised me, a number of guests come to us and say, do you offer carbon offsetting? And now we've had property managers come and say, hey, can you offer carbon offsetting to guests, right? So that becomes part of, again, the booking decision and just communicating that on the front end, and on the back end, back to automating transparency to owners. Something that we've seen is, hey, can you text my owner automatically when someone books carbon offsetting? And that is giving you, as a property manager, another competitive advantage. So surprising me this year. I think we'll just see a lot more of it next year, because some people don't even know what carbon offsetting means, but it's definitely growing.
Excellent. Thank you, Annie. Simon, I'm going to give you the last word, then we're going to move on, because there's another topic that I really would like to...
There's not that much to add to the all three of you spoke to me ahead, which makes a ton of sense. I'm glad this point was raised. I want to go back to Marcus originally, say it's easier said than to be done to diversify a portfolio and where you're at. But I think it all summarizes it. But how are you a property manager in Cyprus who is building up a business in the UK, right? So that's going to be that's a challenge. I mean, all the data that we have seen also last year clearly shows southern markets in Europe are losing, northern markets are gaining in terms of demand and supply. So data clearly shows there is a massive shift in climate change in terms of demand, travel patterns and everything else. You just don't want to be in Greece in August. You just don't. You can sit at home and go into your oven instead. And therefore, this needs to raise strategic questions for any property managers. How do I balance that? At the same time, winter destinations, their season is expanding. We start investing into mountain bike capabilities, mountain bike infrastructure. I mean, Swiss resorts, French resorts in Europe, all the winter resorts are investing heavily into summer activities. And there's a massive shift. And actually, I believe the winter destinations are gaining because their season is expanding, whereas the summer destination is becoming shorter because it's hotter as well. So I think you need to look at this pattern and see how you adopt your business to it. Multi-location operation for any PMC who is hyper-local is very challenging to enter into new destinations, but that's definitely worthwhile so to diversify your demand patterns and have alternatives to your guests to operate in different locations. But of course, it's a massive challenge.
Thank you, Simon. It's really interesting topic. But the next topic that I want to talk about for 2025, and we've touched on it, but it's still, we haven't talked about it that much, is AI. But particularly what I'm really interested in hearing what you guys think is around marketing and AI and around the potential for direct bookings. Now, I read an article, I think it was a couple of days ago, about how AI is impacting or potentially impacting OTAs and their dominance around booking. And I think it's very interesting how it impacts search, but also, so it's not just kind of the ability to do direct bookings, but also it does with MarTech tools that are AI, gives kind of power to smaller businesses and individuals to do things that larger businesses might have done. So, Marcus, I'm going to kick off with you, please.
Thank you. It's a very easy subject for me, since I spent the last year focusing about 99% on AI. So I'll just provide my summary. Essentially, there's a lot with AI going on in the background. I mean, let's say some paperwork handled by a receptionist can now be offloaded, but consumers won't really see that. It will just be either companies are making more profits, or if competition is high, then you'll get lower prices as a consumer. But that's not the exciting part about AI. That's what's going to happen anyway, and that's what's been happening ever since the industrialization started over 100 years ago. The exciting part about AI is specifically on the generative side, and specifically how it can drive demand. We started seeing it. I mean, we run a software business. We started seeing that people were suddenly recommended our software by ChatGPT. And that's when that was a big light bulb moment for us. This was, I think, January this year, February. We started thinking about the future of vacation rentals. And we realized that there's a massive opportunity out there for someone to come in and essentially figure out how do consumers want to book their trips in the future. And when it comes to vacation rentals, the consumer is a lot pickier than they are with a flight. I mean, if you're going from city A to city B and there's only one direct flight that day, then you can't really be picky on the time. If it's in early in the morning, you'll take that, because if you take a later one, you're going to spend the whole day traveling because of connecting flights. So you don't have much choice. But when it comes to vacation rentals, you actually have, the world is your oyster. But then to find that place that has this many bedrooms with these bed configurations, that is in an area that's not too hot, not too cold this time of year, where the weather's probably going to be good, and then you want a trampoline in the backyard for the kids and a heated swimming pool, but you also want walking distance to restaurants. There is no search engine in the entire world that can do that today. There are no filters on any of the OTAs that allows you to put in that criteria. And this is where we think AI has a massive way to disrupt the entire demand in the travel sector, and specifically vacation rentals will benefit a lot because people will want hotels that can't fulfill their needs. I'll give you an example. I went on a business trip, last week. I went to London. I wanted a hotel near Sloan Square where I wanted a gym. They didn't have any. So I had to book a hotel. It was only one night without a gym. And then they told me in the reception, I asked them, do you have a gym here? And they say, yeah, we got a collaboration for only 120 pounds a day, which is almost 200 USD per day. I can get access to a gym. And I thought, that's absolutely ridiculous. There's got to be a better way to book travel than to go on an OTA and put in filters. And that's why we are investing heavily in not only monitoring that space, but building our own AI tools, and especially promoting and developing tools for getting more direct bookings.
Thank you, Marcus. I would have recommended that you went running around the streets of London, because that's actually free. But
it was raining for the full 26 hours, every single hour. I had an alarm clock that went up every hour in the night just to check, did it stop raining? No, it didn't stop raining.
Running in the rain is great because it keeps you cool. But I just want to say something on that. You said that chat is recommending Hostaway. I read today that 61% of recommendations on chat come from earned media at the moment. So just sort of saying that. But those are really good things. And I think, Richie, I do want to come to you, but Jeremy, I think you were waving your hand earlier and wanted to say and jump in.
Yeah, the old-fashioned way. No, I was just gonna say, I mean, it makes a lot of sense, right? Like, following up on Marcus's point, like vacation rental, the shopping experience for the vacation, your vacation is one of the most expensive things that you will buy every year. And a vacation rental search is one of the most complicated searches that you will do. So it's the highest ticket item with the highest search complexity. Are we surprised that Airbnb purchased an AI company, right? A company that's involved in AI search? Like, no, it makes all sense in the world. Like, it's massively predictable that like how AI and that complicated search manifests itself, and the investment that happens in AI tools for guests to discover your rentals is going to be a game changer over the next couple of years. So the tools that you use have to be adept at helping you leverage property data and information about the services you provide and what your property has and what it doesn't have, so that your properties can show up in those very, deep, complicated searches. I'll pass it to Richie. I know he's got his hand up the right way.
Richie, go ahead.
Next time I should go before Jeremy, please, because he keeps saying my points. No. But no, I just want to actually double click on what Jeremy said. We've for long said how vacation rentals particularly, and we also touched on experiences a little bit, but is a very unique industry, and each home is unique, right? And what we were trying to do so far is fit this very unique home into a standardized category of how hotels operate, right? Are you a 3-star? Are you a 3-bed? Are you, how many rooms, how many people do you fit in, right? But there were so many more variabilities to a vacation rental that filters in, whether that was Airbnb, whether that's VRBO, whether that's whatever, right? In a filtered world, structured data, it was really hard to actually find the right home, right? Now with generative AI and search associated with generative AI, right? You're no longer limited to filters of that a few people choose, right? You can create your own filter. And I'm going to steal this from a good friend, David Angotti, right? Who was talking about this recently, but he was talking about his experience where he was trying to search for pet-free vacation rentals, right? And if you search for pet-free vacation rentals, because one of his family members has an allergy, right? All the Google's top results are pet-friendly. And if you look at anywhere else, there is no negative filter. Like you'd find pet-friendly filters, but you'd not find the negative filter, right? But a non-pet friendly place does not necessarily always mean that it would be pet-free, right? And so something like that is what generative AI can truly enable, right? And so from that, what I would say is particularly for people who have their direct booking websites, making sure that their descriptions are actually descriptive, right? Don't get lazy there because we're reading about, like, search engines are reading about your properties in a much better format than ever before, right? And so write out your descriptions well so that they can find, if you're really pet free, they can find it, right? And you're no longer restricted by the few filters that OTS had. Yeah, I think Simon.
Simon?
Well, I'll keep that super short, referring to what Richie and obviously Jeremy already said. You know, summarizing my keynote at DARM, we need to understand how we as individuals in our today's society are already exposed to AI and need to think about how is that going to transform our industry. You know, today I received my playlist of the year of 2024 for Spotify. It was the best day of my life because I heard all my songs that I listened to most in the entire year. So this is simple stuff, right? We have a vacuum cleaner robot. We've given a name. I have a garden robot in the garden who mows my lawn every week, and I give it a name. The kids love it. We have, we're building relationship to AI in our day-to-day life. We're already embracing that stuff. We're going to VRMA in Phoenix, Arizona, and everybody posts on LinkedIn that they're sitting in a self-driving car. It has arrived, right? So before we go crazy on what this means for us as an industry, we need to understand it has already changed our lives. Okay, so now we, as day-to-day users of all these technology, Netflix gives me all the recommendations I need. I don't need to search on Netflix. It gives me stuff that I want to watch because they know exactly my patterns and everything else. So we need to understand how AI-powered solutions and applications that we're using today in our day-to-day lives have changed ourselves, and how do we apply that to our business? Full stop.
Thank you, Simon. We're actually coming up to time. So, but before we end, I want to go around all of you. And if you could give a top tip, a short one, to the managers, the property managers that are watching this, for how to navigate 2025, what would that be? And Jeremy, would you like to go first?
I wouldn't like to go first, and Richie wouldn't like me to go in front of him, but I will. Transparency of operations and what you're doing, and lean into that. Make sure your guests understand the service that you're providing, and importantly, make sure your owners are fully up to speed with what you're doing, so that you can stay ahead and proactive in those owner conversations. I've got to make a big difference in 2025.
Great. Annie, you're up next.
I will say that including the things that your guests are coming to your area to do in your descriptions, because as we've all talked about, those descriptions, if it's in your direct booking site, on your OTA, that is indexing all over the place. So if you are talking about, if everyone is coming to your town for a fish run in Alaska, make sure that you're saying, we have the most amazing recommendations for the fish run. It is really about including that in your descriptions, and that's going to give you an advantage in your area.
Excellent, thank you. And Richie, I'll come to you.
Yeah, this is a very hard one, but I would say you've got to look at, we've spent some time talking about AI, and I think you have to look at AI in particular, right? Where can you include it in your business, and how can you get benefit out of it? Whether that's customer support, whether that's marketing, whether that's pricing, or in whatever aspect you can consider it, right? If nothing else, spend time learning about it in 2025 because it's coming for us, right? Everyone will have it, and you don't want to be the last one on that train.
Thank you, Richie. And Marcus?
I agree with Annie and Richie. It's very important to get your properties out there. What we've seen skyrocketing in the last couple of months, and it is, I think, the best placed company right now in our space for vacation rentals and AI and innovation is Google. When you list your property on Google, it's completely free. And all it requires is that you have a reliable booking engine that has the correct rates. Getting listed on Google will drive a lot of bookings in the coming years. And especially, I think Google might be one of the first ones to become really big in the AI travel space. So you want to make sure that you're listed on Google if you're a property manager and want to make sure that you also get direct bookings in the future.
Thanks, Marcus. And I presume for Hostaway customers, you help them navigate that.
Absolutely. Google only works with professional property management systems, so you unfortunately cannot get listed on Google unless you have a system that is managing your calendar, like Hostaway.
Excellent, thank you. And Simon, last but not least, how to navigate 2025?
Think about where you want to be in 2028.
Skip over a few years. Perfect.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely key because it helps us to put some perspective in what's happening around us. So think 3 years ahead and think about where you want to be in 2025 or 2028. That will, put a lot of things in perspective where you're at next year.
Yeah, that's excellent, excellent insight. So thank you everyone for joining the webinar, and Marcus, thank you to you for hosting it and your fantastic Hostaway team for putting this on. Thank you, Richie, Simon, Jeremy, Annie, thank you all. And for anyone in the audience, you can reach out to these guys on LinkedIn, I'm sure. And thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks a lot.
everyone. Bye-bye.